Hey guys, Zane from the Infinite Jukebox here with another quick album review, and today I wanted to talk about the new Knoll record, As Spoken. As Spoken, the latest studio album from American death grind band Knoll, dons upon its cover an image of this sort of Baroque period, maybe Victorian period mirror that, while still in one piece, feels extremely decayed and in turn uncanny. I like it a lot personally, but especially because I feel like it's ultimately very representative of what's found within the album itself. Everything still coming together into a single piece, but feeling extraordinarily deteriorated in the best way it possibly could. I say this because there are a variety of qualities about this record that I think are pretty applicable to fans of earlier eras of black metal, of death metal, so on and so forth, earlier eras of extreme metal in general, you could even argue. For example, if heavy riffs is what you want, then I can certainly say that As Spoken has them in spades with this sort of style that I think you could arguably compare to sort of early to mid 90s black metal in a lot of ways, just updated sonically for the modern day. Tracks like Revile of Light, for example, have this loose rawness about them that does feel very much connected to older eras within the genres that they belong to, but at the same time, they have this crushing weight behind them that I feel could only really be achieved in the modern day of metal, as recording techniques have evolved, as production techniques have evolved, etc., etc. My point is that there are a lot of moments here that simultaneously manage to feel ancient as far as the history of certain metal subgenres go, while extremely current at the same time, and I think it makes for an odd but very interesting dynamic. You can especially see that on some of the sludgier cuts here, like Portrait, for example, with the guitar work on those songs being absolutely devastating. I mean, a lot of those tracks sound outright cavernous, something that is definitely built upon to an extent by some very interesting, strong, at times echoey production choices as far as how the drum work sounds, but I digress. My point is that they sound very natural and they sound very live in the studio at times, but at the same time, it's recorded so extremely well. This feels like the almost perfect amalgamation of cleanliness and high production value with rawness and pure passion and ambition. Perhaps more importantly than that, though, I also mean to say that it's not like Knoll are really leaning too far into influences or anything like that. This doesn't sound like a ripoff of any specific black metal or sludge metal or death metal or whatever grindcore or other core band, etc., etc., all the different corners of extreme metal out there. It doesn't sound like it's derivative of any of those genres or any specific bands from those genres. It just feels like a very interesting spin on a variety of sounds from a number of different corners and time periods throughout the history of metal, and I think that ultimately that makes for a really interesting listening experience, especially if you are familiar with a variety of those subgenres as histories. There are also several passages throughout As Spoken that allow for things to kind of be broken up a little bit, adding to the intensity of the track list as a whole, with a lot of the sludgier moments adding a lot of intensity to the entire record, some more drone-based kind of moments adding a lot of atmosphere and sonic texturing, and as a whole, I think that greatly benefits the lack of monotony that you eventually find throughout this album. I feel like without those moments, it would just be a little too much at too constant of a rate, but you know what? Here, I think things are pretty perfectly executed and balanced. When it comes to atmospheric pieces, I would really only say that the roughly 3-minute blackened ambient piece Utterance overstays its welcome, and even then, that's only ever so slightly, in my opinion. That isn't to mention vocalist Jamie Eubanks, whose violent, croaking vocal style really adds to the dense layers of this record, making for even more of a violent, cyclone-esque kind of album and listening experience. This is basically just one huge wall of noise, and Eubanks' vocals really do add a lot to that. Ironically, considering Knoll are a death grind band in nature, it feels like some of the weaker moments here come in the form of the shorter tracks like Fettered Oath as well as Guardian Bind, for example. I mean, again, only a couple of minutes per song, and I do think that those tracks, which really heavily lean into the grind part of death grind, don't really get the chance to develop as much in terms of riffs, in terms of atmosphere, as some of the longer cuts here, but even still, they remain solid tracks within their own specific niche within metal, and it's still Knoll doing what they do well. I just mean to say that some of the longer tracks here have more interesting instrumentals, maybe to an extent some more cataclysmic climactic moments, but as a whole, even the shorter cuts here, they still feel absolutely unhinged, and Knoll are damn good at sounding that way, so I mean, I can't really complain too much. As Spoken isn't an album that redefines every single corner of extreme metal, but at the same time, it is an album that does deliver a series of mostly excellent death grind and heavily black metal based tracks. Between some utterly insane heavy riffs, perfectly harsh vocal work, and a pretty haunting sense of decay throughout the vast majority of the record's runtime, it's kind of hard to imagine any big fan of death grind or black metal or other forms of extreme metal not enjoying this, or at least finding some degree of enjoyability out of this. My point is, if you're even remotely interested in any of the various subgenres that could be considered quote-unquote extreme metal, give this one a go. There's a chance you'll find something to like about it. I'm going to give this record 3.5 stars out of 5. And with that being said, that is the end of this quick album review. I've been Zane from the Infinite Jukebox. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.